standing before Cheryl, I delivered my decision with unsettling calm. I'm moving back in with my parents. If you don't like it, we may need to consider divorce, I said, my voice void of emotion. Cheryl froze, shock and confusion flickering across her face as she struggled to process my words. The bluntness of my statement hit her like a physical blow. What are you talking about, Raymond? She stammered, her voice tinged with disbelief. It's simple, I replied coldly, my gaze unwavering. We could use your $7 million inheritance to build a new house with my parents. That's my proposal. Cheryl's face tightened, a knot of dread forming in her chest. Her mother's inheritance, her final gift, had suddenly become a tool in my manipulation. You can't be serious, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I am, I asserted, my tone sharp. It's time for a change. Visions of our past, the love, the laughter, the milestones of raising children, flashed through Cheryl's mind. How had we come so far apart? At 35, a mother of two, she thought she had been living an ordinary life with a man she once adored, but now, standing before her, I was a stranger. You have no right to control my inheritance, she protested, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and confusion. As your husband, I have every right to a say, I replied, my words firm, final. It's my way or the highway, make your choice, Cheryl. Cheryl searched my face for any trace of the man she had once loved, but all she saw was a man driven by greed, his eyes fixed on her inheritance. She realized with a sickening clarity that her marriage had been a lie. Fine, she said, her voice unnervingly calm despite the storm inside her. If that's what you want, then we're done. But, I warned, don't think you'll get any of my money. For the first time, my smugness faltered. Her words hit harder than I expected. Shocked, I spun on my heel, storming out, slamming the door behind me. Cheryl stood alone, her heart pounding. The lines had been drawn. This was no longer just about money, it was about her dignity, her independence. The next morning, the house felt eerily silent as Cheryl made breakfast. The previous night's confrontation replayed in her mind, the anger steadily growing inside her. How could I be so blind, she thought. The money wasn't some pot of gold. It was her mother's legacy, not a cash reserve for me to squander. Their children, Lisa and Marc, sensed the tension but remained quiet. They were too young to understand the complexities of adult relationships, but they knew something was wrong. Cheryl smiled for their sake, masking her turmoil. After dropping them at school, Cheryl drove to her late mother's empty house. The echoes of the past lingered in every room. Sitting in the living room, she remembered how my parents used to make cruel remarks about her lifestyle and even their children. They clung to outdated gender roles, and it seemed I had internalized those views. I don't understand why you still work, my mother had once said with disdain. A woman's place is with her children. Raymond, never defended her. I dismissed my parents' hurtful comments, telling Cheryl to ignore them, but their words had left scars, slowly eroding her self-esteem. Now, with her mother gone and their marriage falling apart, Cheryl felt a deep, bitter resentment toward me. I had never been her ally, always leaving her to face my parents' cruel criticisms alone. She remembered the pain of being pregnant with Lisa, how my parents had openly hoped for a grandson. When Lisa was born, their disappointment was palpable. Next time, make sure it's a boy, they had bluntly said. Sitting in the silence of her mother's house, Cheryl's resolve solidified. She could no longer let Raymond drag her into his toxic world. The thought of using her inheritance to get closer to my parents made her blood boil. She wouldn't let that happen. As she sat there, surrounded by the remnants of her mother's life, a sense of clarity washed over her. She wouldn't be pushed around any longer. For the sake of herself and her children, she would stand firm. Raymond had shown his true colors, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. In the days that followed, Cheryl gathered important documents, preparing for the legal battle that was sure to come. Her lawyer, Gloria, was pragmatic and confident. Don't worry, Cheryl, we'll make sure that inheritance stays where it belongs, she assured her with a reassuring smile. One evening, as Cheryl sifted through her mother's belongings, she found a dusty envelope hidden in a drawer. Inside, there were documents, stock certificates, property deeds, and her hands trembled as she realized the full scope of her mother's hidden wealth. With the current value of the stocks and properties, it totaled a staggering $7 million. This was more than just money, it was her legacy, and no one, least of all Raymond, was going to take it from her. I was stunned. My mother, who had always lived humbly, had somehow amassed a small fortune. She'd been so careful with her money, always prioritizing the future, and now that Prudence was offering me a lifeline, a spark of hope and strength I hadn't expected. I never imagined my mother had saved this much. Along with the financial documents, there was a note in her neat handwriting. Cheryl, I saved this for a rainy day. I hope it gives you and the kids a better life. Use it wisely. Reading her words, tears welled in my eyes. It wasn't just the money, it was the love, the foresight, and the protection she had tried to offer even after she was gone. It felt like a warm embrace from beyond the grave, reminding me I wasn't alone. The next day, I knew what I had to do. I had to confront Raymond. I found him in the living room, flipping through a magazine, his usual smug expression on his face. "Raymond, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady and resolute. He glanced up, irritation flashing in his eyes. "What now, Cheryl?" "I found something from my mother," I began, waving the envelope. "It turns out she left me stocks and properties worth $7 million. Raymond's eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw greed flash across his face before he masked it with a smile. $7 million? Well, that's great news, he said, enthusiasm in his voice, but the glee in his eyes made my stomach turn. "Don't even think about it, Raymond. This money is for me and the kids. You won't see a cent of it," I said, my voice hardening. His expression darkened immediately. "You can't keep it all to yourself, Cheryl. We're married. What's yours is mine," he shot back, his words sharp. Anger boiled inside me. "You've shown your true colors, Raymond. You don't care about me or the kids. All you care about is the money," I said, my voice cutting through the air. Raymond jumped to his feet, his face reddening with fury. "You're being selfish, Cheryl. I'm thinking about our future, our family." "What family, Raymond?" I snapped back. "The one you're willing to sacrifice for your own self." I leaned against the counter, my heart humming, but my composure remained intact. "It's not about being clever, Raymond. It's about doing what's right. That money is for me and the kids, not for your foolish dreams." He slammed his fist on the counter, making me flinch. "I am your husband, Cheryl. I have rights to that money," he growled, his words dripping with venom. "You're just he started, but I interrupted. "A what, Raymond? A woman who refuses to bow to your greed and manipulation." His face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this, Cheryl. I'll make sure you never see a penny of that money." I felt the weight of his threat, but I refused to show fear. "Is that a threat, Raymond?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear creeping into my chest. He leaned in, his breath hot and foul. "It's a promise." I pushed past him, my body trembling with adrenaline but my resolve firm. "We'll see about that," I said, voice cold. "The court will decide." As I walked away, his harsh words followed me. "You're going to end up with nothing, Cheryl, nothing." The next morning, my lawyer called. "Cheryl, Raymond's filed for divorce. He's claiming half of your inheritance." I took a deep breath, a mix of fear and determination stirring inside me. "Let him try. I'll fight him every step of the way." Gloria's voice was firm and unwavering. "We have a strong case, Cheryl. Don't worry, we'll make sure justice is served." That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of the battle ahead pressed heavily on me, but I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. My mother's legacy was mine to protect, and I wouldn't let anyone, least of all Raymond, take it away. I thought of my children, sleeping soundly in their rooms, unaware of the storm brewing. I was fighting this battle for them, for their future. Raymond had become a stranger to me, a man consumed by greed and malice, but I was no longer the woman he thought he could control and intimidate. Closing my eyes, I envisioned the courtroom, the judge, and the final verdict. I saw myself standing tall, unwavering, not just fighting for money, but for my dignity, my children's future, and the quiet strength my mother had always shown. This was my fight, and I was ready for it. The legal battle was brutal. Raymond's strategy was obvious. He aimed to paint me as a selfish wife, hoarding the family's resources, but how could he ever understand? His arguments were weak, more a desperate grasp at straws than a legitimate case. One afternoon, we found ourselves in mediation, a last-ditch effort before the court hearing. Raymond sat across from me, his lawyer by his side, his eyes cold and his posture arrogant. "Let's be reasonable, Cheryl," his lawyer began. "Raymond is entitled to a share of this inheritance. It's only fair." I turned to Gloria, my resolve unshaken. "Fair? Raymond hasn't contributed a single thing to this inheritance. It's from my late mother, meant for me and my children." Raymond leaned in, sneering. "Come on, Cheryl, stop being spiteful. Don't you think the kids would want their father to have a share?" A surge of anger bubbled up inside me. "This isn't about spite, Raymond. It's about justice. You've never once considered what the kids actually want. This is about your greed." Before his lawyer could interrupt, Raymond silenced him with a wave of his hand. "You think you can just take everything? Play the grieving daughter and the wronged wife," he spat. I met his gaze without flinching. "This isn't a game, Raymond. You're the one trying to take what isn't yours." The mediator, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, interrupted. "Let's keep things civil. This is about finding a resolution." Raymond cut her off, his voice rising in anger. "A resolution? She's the unreasonable one. The tension in the room was suffocating. I kept my voice calm but resolute. I'm being perfectly reasonable. I'm protecting what my mother left for her grandchildren. Raymond's claims have no merit. Seeing the conversation going nowhere, the mediator called for a break. As we stood up, Raymond leaned in close, his breath hot in my ear. You'll regret this, Cheryl. I'll make sure of it. His words were chilling, but they only strengthened my resolve. I wasn't backing down, not now, not ever. I was standing firm for my children and their future. I left the mediation room with my heart pounding, but my determination unshaken. Raymond's threats were empty, his legal position was weak. I knew the law was on my side, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. In the weeks before the court hearing, I buried myself in legal preparations with Gloria. The kids stayed with my sister, sheltered from the worst of the chaos. I missed them more than words could express, but I knew this fight was for them as much as it was for me. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. I walked into the courtroom, steeling myself to face Raymond and counter every lie he might spin. This was the moment, and I was ready to face it head-on. The courtroom became a battleground, where words were weapons. Raymond's lawyer tried to build a story of a husband wronged, denied his rightful share, but under Gloria's skilled questioning, his arguments crumbled like a house of cards. During a recess, Raymond cornered me in the hallway, his face twisted with rage. You're ruining everything, Cheryl. You really think you'll walk away with all that money? He hissed. I stood tall, despite the fear trying to gnaw at my resolve. It's not your money, Raymond. It never was. He stepped closer, his voice a venomous whisper. I'll drag this out as long as it takes. I'll bleed you dry with legal fees. I met his stare with unwavering strength. Do what you must, but I won't let you bully me into submission. When we returned to the courtroom, I felt a surge of empowerment. Raymond's threats seemed meaningless now. His bravado was a mask for his desperation. When the final verdict was read, it was a clear affirmation of my rights. The judge declared the inheritance mine, validating my legal and moral claim. Raymond's face, as the judgment was read aloud, was a reflection of defeat, the battle he fought and lost. The victory was bittersweet. I had won the legal battle, but it had cost me my marriage. The family dynamic I had once cherished was now shattered, the life I had known irreparably altered. In the weeks that followed, Raymond's life seemed to spiral out of control. His carefully constructed reputation, built on lies and intimidation, began to crumble. The community, once fearful of him, now saw him for the man he truly was, the greedy individual who had tried to seize what wasn't his. I heard rumors of his misfortune, losing his job, his friends, and his standing in the town. It was a dramatic fall from grace, and though I didn't feel any satisfaction, there was something deeply poetic in the justice of it all. One evening, a mutual acquaintance called. Cheryl, have you heard about Raymond? They asked. I paused for a moment, then replied, no, what about him? He's moving out of town, lost his job, his house, he's basically broke. A complex emotion stirred within me, something like relief, maybe even a touch of vindication. Raymond had tried to destroy me, but in the end, he had only destroyed himself. After hanging up, I gazed at a photo of my children on the mantel. This fight had been for them, for their security, for their future. That night, as I tucked them into bed, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The battle was over, we had won, and we were stronger for it. We were free from Raymond's shadow, ready to move forward into a new chapter. Our lives would be different, but we would be okay. Together, we were unstoppable. In the months that followed the court ruling, life gradually found a new rhythm. The victory gave me closure, but it also signified the beginning of a fresh journey, one of healing, of rebuilding. I decided it was time to sell the house, the home filled with memories of pain and conflict. Each box I packed represented a step away from my past with Raymond, a deliberate move toward a brighter future for Lisa and Mark. One day, as I was sorting through old boxes in the attic, I found a photograph of Raymond and me during happier times. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to mourn the life I thought we had, the love I had once believed in. But as I stared at his smiling face in the picture, I realized that man was gone. The man I had married no longer existed. He had revealed his true nature, and it was nothing like the image captured in that photo. With a final, decisive motion, I tossed the picture into the trash, a symbolic act of letting go. Moving to a new town provided a fresh start. I found a cozy home in a welcoming neighborhood, and the kids quickly adjusted to their new school. Making friends with ease, I poured more of my energy into my writing, finding peace in the stories I created. One evening, as I tucked Lisa into bed, she looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes and asked, Mom, do you miss Dad? Her question caught me off guard. Sometimes I miss who I thought your dad was, I said softly, but we're better off now. We're a strong team, just the three of us. She nodded, her expression wise beyond her years. I like it here, Mom, I like our new home. Her words warmed my heart. We had come so far. As I lay in bed that night, I reflected on Raymond's downfall. His greed and malice had come crashing down on him, leaving him with nothing. Meanwhile, here we were, rebuilding and finding joy in our new life. There was no joy in Raymond's misfortune, but there was a deep sense of justice in how things had unfolded. The kids and I still had a long road of healing ahead, but we were on the right path. The inheritance, now securely invested, would provide for their education and our future needs. As I closed my eyes, thoughts of my mother filled my mind. Her strength, her foresight, had truly been our salvation. In her wisdom, she had given me the tools to protect my children and myself. As sleep gently took me, I felt that absence of peace. The storm that had once threatened to consume us had passed, leaving behind clarity and hope. We had weathered the worst, and now, with the dawn of a new day, we were ready to face whatever came next, stronger, wiser, and with renewed optimism.